everyone. My name is Brittany Williams, and I'm the marketing specialist here at Rice. I have the privilege today of sitting down with Melissa L. Bradley, an investor and educator and the visionary entrepreneur of 1863 Ventures. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
We've already been in here having some fun, chatting, and I'm just so excited to sit down with you and get your story, learn more about you, and have our entrepreneurs and followers learn more about you as well.
Look forward to it.
All right, so let's dive in. Let's start with your entrepreneurial journey. Have you always wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I always wanted to be wealthy. I've now come to realize as a January Capricorn, I also like to be in control, at least of my own destiny. But I grew up in a household that was entrepreneurial, that was supportive of following your dreams. When I realized that investment banking was probably not going to be my ultimate destination because of some market conditions before I graduated, I just took a job. And in that job, I was like, this is not what I want to do every single day. And so I had the privilege to come up with a business idea and talk to my boss and build that business idea while I still had a full-time job because I knew that my department was about to get downsized. And so once I was able to start that first business, had some success, it was no looking back.
Oh, okay, awesome. So you would advise entrepreneurs if they're, in a traditional role to keep that and build.
Hell yeah. I think because the capital access reality for Black folks is limited and we don't have a lot of, friends and family money. I think many of us have used a full-time job as kind of that investment vehicle. So I think as long as you can get away with it, as long as you're transparent about it, as long as it doesn't impact your negative performance because you don't want to go out on a bad reputation, I think you actually should think about how to best use your time. Yeah.
You. Okay. So tell me more about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So, during my first entrepreneurial venture, I went to the SBA to get a loan and they told me no. And they said 3 reasons. They said, 1, I'm Black. 2, I'm female. And 3, I have debt. I was like, no shit, Sherlock. I had just graduated from Georgetown. And so I realized that in that moment, no matter how good I am as a founder, I have to figure out how to mitigate the risk of somebody else being able to tell me no. I need to be able to make my own decisions. And so when I walked out of that meeting, I said, if there's ever anything I can do to help other founders like me, I will do that. And so after I was able to sell my first company, I began to really think about what was my journey like and how can I make it better for other people. And it started in the youth field. So I had a youth entrepreneurship program. And then I became an angel investor and started investing and then started a venture fund. And it's just been a multiplier effect. But I think from my early childhood, I can remember my goal was to shift the paradigm of capitalism so that people of color were not always on the bottom. I spent many years in college, like probably some other folks, trying to figure out how do I dismantle capitalism. And I was like, that's going to take too long. But so right now, my focus is really helping founders become CEOs because I think those are 2 different roles. A founder is head down, scattered, doing everything. Here's what I got to do today, but oftentimes does not have the time to think long term. And a CEO is someone who has a team, right, who can really think strategically and think about growth and scale. And I think it's important that Black founders think about becoming CEOs because the economics are different. You're going to average around $30-something thousand in annual recurring revenue if you're a solopreneur. That bumps up to over $350,000 ARR as soon as you have 1 more employee. So I think this idea of like, I'm going to do it all by myself, it's overrated and it's not economically feasible.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the economic climate right now. Mm-hmm. We're in a tough time. Yeah. And the reality is that the question on people's minds is, should I go back to a traditional job?
Yeah.
Or should I keep going in this dream, in this entrepreneurial journey? What advice would you give them or encouragement?
Well, I think we have to realize now that good government job is no more. And so I think that it's less around do you leave or do you stay? I don't know that it's that binary of a decision, but I think it is how long do you stay to build up a financial cushion where you feel comfortable and you have the space to make those decisions. I think too often people start a business and they're just constantly in hustle mode, which is fine, except in hustle mode, you don't have time to sit and think and contemplate. You are so much in the weeds and the tactics that you oftentimes forget strategy. So I think whatever people need to do, do it. But I do want to say that I think one of the things I'm really laser focused on now is just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I don't know that everybody should be a founder or a CEO. I think you have to understand that it's really hard work, not to say that we can't do hard work, but there is a level of grind in the beginning that I'm not sure is for everybody. And I have seen founders come through and I'm like, you know what, sis, you know what, bro, like, I just think you'd be better off. Like your end goal is to be able to help your family. Like, let's talk about some other things. I think your financial acumen has to be on point. And that's not just 2+2. That is really understanding your financial statement. So I think that if people are going to make that jump, they have to understand there's a skill set that they need to have and a toolkit they need to take with them when they make that jump.
I love that. Thank you. That was a good tidbit. That was definitely for me.
And for everybody.
I love that you went into mentorship and just knowing your financial statements, knowing all of the ins and outs of entrepreneurship and in that journey in your business. And so I kind of want to pivot to talking about the Russell Innovation Center.
Yeah.
First, let's start with how did you hear about Rice? What's been your journey with Rice?
So I've known the Russell family for a long time. I mean, I don't know what Black person doesn't know people in ATL. So I have lots of friends who go up here. The nephew of Maynard Jackson is like my little brother. So I have been coming to ATL for a while and had a chance to meet Mr. Russell. And then when this whole thing was coming about, I don't even remember how I met Jay. I think it was through a mutual friend or a conference, but I came when there were no walls. There was nothing. Wow. And Jay walked me through and like, this is the dream. And I was like, okay, all right. And then we came and actually did some programming in partnership with Rice, which was awesome. We did that probably 3 or 4 times. And then I came back again just to kind of hang out. And I was like, oh, now we got levels, we got floors, we got stuff happening. And I think it's just an important institution. And I think it's an important institution because in this world where everything has gone mobile and everything has gone like you over there, and highly dispersed, I think one of the things that we have missed in entrepreneurship for Black people is that this is a community sport. This is a team sport. I don't know if people are familiar with Honeypot, but Cy Gray, who is the CEO of dope brother, really good friend of mine. And during COVID, we had this discussion on what are the challenges that Black founders face, and not the obvious ones, but kind of the personal ones. And one of them is that we come from a culture that is focused on community, that is focused on giving back. And that is counter to this capitalist definition of entrepreneurship. So I think to have this space, to have an intermingling of people who come here for their own business, but can merge and talk about collaboration, I think just having a permanent space dedicated to them when so many other things are up in the air and there's a lot of discourse. Here is a place of calm. Here is a place of peace. And then add on top of that kind of the programming aspect where there's a continuation of edification and education that I think is huge, right? Because I think people think they start a business and it's over. And the reality is you are always learning, you are always growing, you are always building. Particularly if you want to move from 100,000 to 1 million, there's some key breakpoints that you're basically rebuilding the business. So I think this is a huge anchor for the community. And I'm just proud that I've had the privilege to be here more than once.
Awesome. And we're excited to have you over and over again. As I mentioned, I'm newer here, but it's great meeting you.
Same here.
Learning more about you and hearing your wisdom and your insights. And so let's dive deeper. Let's get some more wisdom, get some more insight. Let's see. I would love for you to talk a little bit about balancing family and business. I think that can be maybe a struggling point for some folks in learning how to manage time and all of that. I would love for you to dive a little bit into that.
Well, I appreciate you asking me, but I ain't got the answer either. My wife and I have been married 23 years. We have 6 kids, and we have a 7th son. And I'm not sure that we've balanced it individually, but I think we've balanced it as a couple. And I think that's important. I think whether you're in a relationship or not, or you have a co-founder, I don't know that any of us, particularly if you're like a true entrepreneur, like you're always thinking, like, maybe they call that different names now and different acronyms, but the reality is it's hard to turn it off because you're always looking for opportunity. And so I think the reality is, entrepreneurship to me is a team sport. So whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, you just have to have somebody who's going to balance you. Because I don't know that all of us have the discipline, particularly in the context of capitalism and, we've got to be 150% better than everybody else. I don't know, at least I didn't. I don't know about you. I don't think many of us as Black people are growing up in communities that say like, it's all right. you gonna be all right. Like Rest is Resistance, best book I ever read, but like that didn't grow up with that. And so I think many of us, just even without being a founder, are just on the grind, on the hustle. And so you have to find somebody who can just tap you and be like, it's okay if you don't do that today. Jan Van Zant says, first you get a whisper, then you get a tap, then you hit a brick wall. And the hope is that all of us have a group of people who will hold us down from a health perspective, mental, emotional, and physical, before we hit that brick wall.
So good. Oh, thank you. Okay. We've already talked about why you think the rice community is important.
Yeah.
If you could give one piece of advice to entrepreneurs within the rice community,
Sure.
specifically, what would it be?
Know your numbers. I have been a venture capitalist for over 20 years. And I think one of the things that I consistently hear is like, Black people don't get venture. Now, not everybody needs venture, let's be really clear. But I also used to regulate banks. And I think there is racism and there is sexism, no doubt, in the financial industry. But sometimes we just don't show up well. Like, I hate to call us out, but we don't show up well. And when you tell a story, that's great. But as an investor, whether I'm a bank manager or a venture capitalist, I need the story to have quantitative value. Yeah. And I think I see people's decks and they're beautiful and they're stunning. And I get to the numbers and it's like this whack Excel spreadsheet that I don't even understand. And so I think people have to understand you got to know your numbers. When I run into brothers and sisters who are on the verge of closing their business because they took their eye off the numbers and they were focused on vision. And I think we have to understand that whether they're green or red or black, they're all good. They are nothing but a data point. Those numbers do not define, your valuation does not define your value, but it is a guidepost and a reflection of how you've made decisions. And I know too many people are like, I'm just going to let my accountant do that. Please don't outsource that. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and some other athletes have found out you do not want to outsource your assets. But I think really understanding and getting comfortable with the numbers, because if you run a marketing campaign and the numbers don't look right, you can't be like, oh, I messed up. You'd be like, something didn't work. Like, let me figure out what did, what didn't. If something did go well, don't be like, oh, I'm making you want to double down on that. And so I think that's my biggest piece of advice. I am biased. I'm a finance major, but like, you got to know your numbers.
So good. You said your valuation does not dictate your value.
Absolutely not.
That's good.
Look, I don't know who you are, white, black, whatever, but at some point in time, all of our bank accounts have been red. So it's all good.
Yeah.
It's a moment in time.
Okay. So one more question about Rice.
Yeah.
At Rice, we believe access changes everything. We're always harping on uncommon access is what we offer. What does access mean to you in the context of entrepreneurship?
Oh, I think access means so many things. It's a great question. I think too often people think it's capital access, but I think one of the things that I missed in my first business was having access to somebody who'd been on that journey before me. I did not meet my first fellow Black CEO till after I had an exit, and I was like, dude, where you been all my life? Because my journey is not the journey of Bill Gates for sure, nor is it the journey of Sarah from Spanx. And so I think that access to people who have been before you is extremely important. I think giving yourself access to be open, to make change is extremely important. I think accessing the resources that are available are extremely important. I think accessing your inner spirit and saying, like, maybe this is not the right time is extremely important. I think accessing your family just so they understand, like, this is, I may not return your phone call right away. It's okay. I think access is so important because to me, access for me as a Black person is I've given myself permission to seek out something. And sometimes it's in myself and sometimes external. And I think too often founders are supposed to have all the answers, and the reality is we don't.
I love your take on access. Okay. All right. Now we're going to have a little bit of fun.
Uh-oh. Okay. I think I'm ready. I was up at 5 a.m. to get on the plane, so let's see. I don't know if I'm fun, but let's see.
It's not too crazy. What is an outrageous or wildly, imaginative business idea that you would love to see just, come to fruition? If there were no resource issues, no capital issues, what's a business you'd like to see happen?
When I was growing up, I'm a huge Jetsons fan, and I just learned that the Jetsons is going to become a movie.
Oh.
And Jim Carrey is going to be George Jetson. So really? I think I think it's fascinating that all these Black billionaires are playing around with space travel, but Nikki Giovanni was like, we deserve to be in space, right? When you think about, oh gosh, I'm blanking on her name and I should be shot for this, but the sister who was kind of the Afro-futurist in the early days, I think we are used to going into the unknown. So I would love to see a business that takes Black people to space, but not for exploitation, for retreat. to just be away from what we're experiencing. So that would be cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
What a great answer. Okay. All right. One more.
Okay.
If you could have dinner with any entrepreneur, past or present, who would it be and why?
Man, that's a tough one because for the longest time, I wanted to have dinner with Richard Branson, and I did. So who else?
Awesome.
You know what? I think I would love to have dinner with Madam C.J. Walker. I have the privilege to know her great-granddaughter, I think it is, and Amelia Bundles, who's in New York, or some of those early pioneers, right, to really understand how they did it. Because I feel like a very good friend of mine has a saying that we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. But sometimes I'm worried we're letting them down because what we're seeing now ain't nothing like that's a white fountain. There's the black fountain. There's nothing like you can't get on the bus. Like we know hardship in a very different way. And I would love to go back, talk to the brother who started the first insurance company, or the sister who started the first black bank, or Madam C.J. Walker who was out there selling hair products, daughter. Like, what was it like, right? And where was your personal resilience? How did your community support you? Because those are the lessons that have not carried forward that we need to know. We hear the story, we hear the glory, but we don't understand, like, who'd you talk to? Like, how many no's did you get? Because I think that would ground us to say, like, oh, it's woe is me. No, like, this ain't shit.
Yeah.
Like, we've come a long way, but our lessons are not coming forward with us.
Oof, that would be a great
Yeah.
conversation. Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, one more question for you.
I'm ready.
You have a podcast.
I do.
And you're sharing some very impactful information. People are sharing their stories. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me about your podcast.
So I didn't want to do a podcast. Let me just be honest. But a friend of mine, Diana Williams, who I went to school with, we were the only two black female finance majors at Georgetown. And she was an investment banker and then went off to make movies. And we were like, what the hell? But good for her because she ended up running the Star Wars franchise, running that and making a lot of money. And so now she's in entertainment. And she says to me, she goes, people need to hear from you. And I was like, how many more podcasts do we need? But come to find out, people actually did need to hear it. The idea for the podcast is called Founder Hustle. One is it's transforming the hustle as a positive thing, not a negative thing, because in the black community, I think it's always been associated with somebody who's not doing something right. I think we're doing amazing things that are not the white norm. It focuses on lessons learned, so I'm not trying to hype anybody up like, yo, this is easy, you made $1 billion. We don't even talk about finance. We talk about what are the stories that are binding you and what are the lessons you would pay it forward. And we have a diversity of folks who work on the supply side and the demand side. But the idea is really just to get the reality out there, right? You watch, Shark Tank, and we've had many of our founders on Shark Tank, but we're watching a 10-minute blip of like a 2-hour process of which you have psychological counseling when it's over. And I don't know that we are providing the full story and the full context of what it takes. So that's what we're trying to do. And then with that, we have something called Deep Dive, where if there's a topic that we've touched upon, we think people really need to dive into that. We do. So we had somebody, an African-American woman, or African woman actually, who was working at a bank. And she talked about how bankers should be your first responder for your business, which is awesome because I don't think any of us think of banks as first responders. But And in that conversation, we started talking about the banking system, and I realized that I don't know that most people know, right, that there was a height of black banks, and that at one point in time, I had the privilege to regulate them as part of my presidential appointment under Clinton, and we had over 100. Now we barely have like 20, and what does that look like? So we try to pull out things that I think are relevant to our culture to help people understand the histories, because if you can't go forward if you don't know where you've come.
Wow. You.
Yeah.
Okay, so where can we find your podcast? Sure. And where can we follow you after today if folks want to get more insight, more wisdom? Can you talk about where we can find you? Sure.
Let me make Diana proud. So you can find me at @BradleyML on Twitter and Instagram, at New Majority Venture on Instagram as well. The podcast can be found on our website, www.newmajorityventures.net, or you can just search. Apparently my cell phone's on the interweb because I get calls all the time.
Oh, I love that. Access.
There you go. Maybe not always morning at the right time. I'm in dinner. Can I call you back? But yes, access.
Okay. Anything you would like to leave our entrepreneurs with, our stakeholders with, anybody who might be interested in rice that watches this? Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would just amplify again that entrepreneurship is a team sport. And when you come here to Rice, you have a team. You have a team of people that can help support you emotionally, financially, from a marketing perspective. This is an amazing setup. And I will say to you, being able to walk in the building and just be surrounded by my people who I know are nurturing me in some way or another, I think it's just huge. And the beauty is you can just come and hang out if you want. So I just think people need to take advantage of this resource, whether you're in ATL or you're passing through, come on by. And just know, I think something that Jay talks about and Rice stands for is that in this economic environment where we have the opportunity as Black people to be what I call the new majority, now is the perfect time to build Black business.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Melissa,
you. I
for joining
appreciate
me
you.
today. It's truly been a pleasure.
My honor.
Thank you all for watching. Make sure you tune into our next episode where we're gaining wisdom from amazing people like Melissa Bradley. Make sure you follow her, like, subscribe, share this video, and thank you all for watching. Have an amazing day.